Good morning and or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Idiots Seeking Village, the audio version of a lavage as we flood your ear canal and cleanse it of all bad thoughts by filling it with more new bad thoughts. I am one of your hosts, Rich, and my co-host Adam is here with me today. Adam, say hello to everyone.
How's it going, man? That's such a word salad that you started it off with. Lavage. I don't even know if I know what that means.
It's a nice little cleanser, right? Like a palate cleanser for your ear. Adam, I've got a fun question for you this morning. First off, how you feeling?
Today was the first day of school for my kids,
Yeah?
so that was a rough morning.
No, no.
But
Any incidents?
just my sons that had a hard time this week with the idea of going to school for some reason.
Emotionally, yeah, of
Really hard
course.
time. Yeah.
So ours was yesterday, and we got a form back from the local propaganda factory and re-education center, and it said it was basically who is authorized to release your child from school, right? So basically just the parent, like who can call in and allow them to be
Picked up
dismissed.
or yeah.
Well, not pick up, right? It was
Okay.
approval to dismiss, right? So like anyone you put on this list could in theory call and say, I'm taking so and so out
Right.
of the school. And I just wrote LOL no backsies and signed it.
Oh
So
my
as
God.
far as I'm concerned, I don't have to be at bus pickup this afternoon. I think that's going to work as far as I'm concerned. It's signed, dated. It's a legally binding contract. So we'll see what the school district says.
Oh my. I know yesterday my daughter went to school for like an hour just to see the new school, and they at dismissal they got into a bus accident.
Jesus Christ. On the first,
But it was
it's not
super
even the
minor.
first
Like
day. Is
they
day
it was
minus one.
yeah, they sideswiped another bus, but very little. But that means they
Shouldn't
had
be
to like
laughing, but
all get off the bus. Nurses had to check them out, make sure that they were okay, which they all were, thankfully. And they came home like an hour later after that when they were supposed to be home. But, jeez, Christ, off to a good year.
yeah, off to a good start. It's one of those. Is it going to be like this kind of year, or is it like we just got the problem
Yeah,
incidents out of the way, and that's going to be smooth sailing?
yeah, get all that crap out first hour of the day, and let's move on.
Well, so it sounds like between getting your kids ready this morning and the pre prep, you're in a good mental headspace and good to kind of get started here, right?
Yep, sounds good, man.
Perfect. So let me enlighten your day. Again, an auditory lavage to get you kind of cleansed and going. Adam, a question for you. Who
Yes,
goes
sir.
who goes fascist?
Somebody who didn't read the rules of you never go full fascist. You go part fascist, a little bit fascist, but not full fascist.
You never
Uh,
go. So we're going with the Tropic Thunder
Tropic
approach. You,
Thunder.
you, you, you
Oh
never
yeah,
go full fascist.
yeah. That's it. You just can't. I mean, I think everybody has a little in them, like a little something, and then a guy comes along and is able to push them in the direction to say, "Hey, this is a great idea. Shit's not working out for me so far, so why not?"
I think it's actually interesting point you bring up, right? Is I think we've all definitely had that thought at some point, like what would I do if I were in charge? And if you're honest with yourself, you realize you would definitely abuse that power the moment
Yeah,
you're given it. Or,
benevolent dictatorship all the way.
right, exactly. I don't know if I've ever truly met anyone who hasn't said I'd be a benevolent dictator given the opportunity. And everyone uses benevolent, but it's kind of like Princess Bride is you keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means. Kind
I
of
didn't even
moment.
know once I learned what it meant, I was like, "Oh, that's what I would be." I'm just not going to use the word dictator. I'm going to be a benevolent dictator. I'm going to do. I mean, somebody always gets screwed. There's nothing. No, there's nothing perfect in this world. Like no matter how much money you have, no matter how much power you have, as long as there's more than a couple people, but somebody's going to be left short. It's just the way it is.
For sure. And I think we, generally speaking, we live in a world where like friends, family, neighbors, people that we consider good people, intelligent people, reasonable people, given the opportunity, would absolutely, with some level of push or pull, would take advantage of that opportunity. And, that's where I think we get to today, right? Where they start to express what seemed like crazy ideas, like mass deportation by masked federal agents, onshore and offshore concentration camps. And what we talked about the other day, right? Just sending in the military for policing, and now updated since then. They say they're sending them into Chicago, right? So I think Chicago's parks and medians and curbs are going to be looking spectacular once the National Guard brings its rakes in and starts to do a little bit of mulching and whatnot ahead of the winter. It's going to be a beautiful fall in Chicago, I think.
Fools, they should know that you never mulch in the fall. You just don't do that. It's a waste of money to have to do it in the spring.
I'm not familiar with the military's knowledge of landscaping, but we're about to find out.
They don't have a landscaper in charge.
Yeah. So I think, I think we've kind of been dancing around this topic for a little bit, but yeah, it's, people get this opportunity for power, and it's easy for them to fall into that trap ultimately. And I think, and I'm definitely a big part of this, right? I've kind of looked at just what's been going on, not just the last 10 years, but kind of around the world and looking at it my whole life. And I've always, and you definitely had this thought, and probably most people, the 8 or 9 people who might listen to this, have thought like it's easy to reduce craziness and crazy behavior to a lack of intelligence, or to be like, how dumb are these people?
No,
right?
You're 100%
And
right.
why are they doing this? Or these people are dumb, or this is so stupid. Why are you so stupid? If only you knew better, right? Or if even you're just a little bit better educated, right? The schools have failed us on these. And that it's just, if you're dumber or you're less educated or you're just not as intelligent, it's easy to be swayed and influenced by propaganda. It's easy for us to be like, oh, it's all Fox News, Newsmax, QAnon. It's, CNBC, it's CNN, right? MSNBC. These are all just propaganda channels. And you're so stupid for believing anything. And it's not, and you, the person, are stupid or unintelligent or dumb for believing that. And that's something that I've been thinking about for a while. It's something that I've struggled with, right? It's, I've always kind of adhered to, if you remember, I think it was the You Are All Diseased show by George Carlin, right? Where he goes, think about someone you think to be of average intelligence, and then realize that half the people are dumber than that person.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
That has been my go-to since I was like 15 and I first saw the show or whatever. And it's easy, right? You see, you get, especially during election times or during some sort of event, you get some like meth adjacent trailer park residents in rural Ohio explain why they think the way they do. And you go, Jesus Christ, I know that guy. There were dozens of them in my high school, and they're all dumber than a bag of rocks. And unfortunately, I think it's not right. And not right as in it's not a proper way to think. It's just not correct. It's a really reductive way of thinking about things, and I think it makes it harder to bridge the gap with people who might be intrigued by kind of fascist adjacent ideas, or they think there's some merit to the ideas, even if they don't necessarily love the execution of them or the outcome. They love the outcome, or they like the idea of the outcome, but they don't love the way it's being done. Or at least there's like, to them, an element of truth in the issues. Like there's a concern that they have, and at least, well, here's a potential solution, right? Even though I don't think it's perfect, it does address a problem. And plenty of intelligent people are like that. They're on board with the ideas that, I think accurate enough, objectively sitting back, we look at these ideas as fascist or authoritarian. And you look at some of these people, and I think when you just scratch under the surface, you realize that guy's just a dick. And they've always have been. And just because, they seem intelligent or successful on the outside, they never really expressed those ideas because they didn't have an opportunity, right? Kind of going back to, if you had the chance, if you had the opportunity for power and control, you would definitely most likely abuse it, or at least, abuse it in some way that probably wouldn't be cool, and that you would objectively kind of be like, yeah, that's kind of a dick move. And that doesn't mean that whether these people aren't intelligent. And then you kind of look at it like, okay, so is it then just a power grab? Is it a lack of empathy? Do they simply just not care about consequences because they don't perceive themselves as ever being potentially on the receiving end of those consequences, right? They're like, oh, that's affecting someone else. It's not going to affect me.
They might not even think about it because I think you really nailed a lot of check marks right there of how you painted this picture. And I think it comes down to, right, some people have a bag of rocks for brains, and it goes a whole socioeconomic way from people who are poor to rich, and they have different views on how they would execute upon fascism. We have a tendency to try to blame a lot of colored brown people, black people, any kind of color, and that plays to a lot of people. But you never hear like, well, who's hiring those people? It's the rich white guy. But you never hear the clamor, let's get all the rich white guys. Let's get them.
Get a little bit of that.
Just not nearly as much as you don't see them. We're not deporting any of them.
Yeah, it's always like eat the rich, right? Or
Yes.
get the 1%, but it's never like, let's just round up the wealthy people and just ship them off to Mars or the moon or something,
Yeah.
right? Just get them out of here. Put them on an island. There's no serious, politician or movement or anything to kind of get rid of the wealthy.
Right. And I think if you're in a low socioeconomic situation, it seems overwhelming and daunting about that rich guy who's exporting all your jobs to another country because there's not much you can do about it. And the rich guy's like, well, I want to keep all this power. So I need those guys to vote for me. And then the rich guy is the one who ends up taking power at some point, or at least has to be somewhat eloquent enough. And I don't even know how Trump is president because he's not that eloquent, but he speaks to the people.
Well,
He gives them what they want and need.
Specifically because he's not eloquent, right? He
Right.
speaks, I think, what was the analysis? Like he speaks at a fourth grade level. But again, your average person really does resonate with that kind of simple, straightforward talk, right? You and I have definitely, I have, I'm sure you have, plenty of people who've been like, I like it because he tells it the way it is, right? How many times have you heard that over the last eight to 10 years? He says it like it is. It's like,
I mean, yeah, I remember Bush Jr. when he was elected. One of the big points was that he was a guy you could have a beer with versus Al Gore. So it was like, I understand that, but half the time Trump doesn't make any sense.
I wish I had that shark boat battery like electrocution speech from last summer handy. I would love to repeat it out loud because it is truly insane what he did. I think he did that at CPAC or at some campaign stop.
God,
And it was absolutely bonkers. I wish I had it in front of me, but yeah, it's not about that, right? It's not about intelligence. It's about charisma. You don't, again, W is a good example of that. You don't have to be an intelligent guy to be engaging, to be relatable.
Right.
And Trump has, definitely one of those guys, right? Biden, not nearly as engaging. I've seen video clips of him interacting, especially with like Trump supporters and whatnot. He actually, as an individual, one-on-one, he's actually quite engaging. He's actually quite charismatic. Regardless of what you think of him, I don't think he radiates that as much when he's on stage, the way Trump does, in the same way that he can, one guy's good one-on-one, the other guy's better at speaking to a crowd.
Yeah, where there's nobody who can question what he's saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at it. I mean, Biden was the king of the gaffes. Oh my God, can't believe he said that. Can't believe he said that. Trump is maybe because it's all the time. I don't know, but it does not get any of the same feedback or lashing out or negativity like Biden did, because Biden like was doomed. Oh, he can't run. He's gonna say some silly stupid stuff. Here's like, well, he says a lot of silly stupid stuff. People still love this guy. Let's pick him.
It's so funny. Like all the criticisms of Biden, you could easily level at Trump as well, but depending on whether you like the guy or not, right? Whether he charismatically appeals to you in one way or another dictates whether or not you let that stick, seemingly. It's like Biden's too old. Okay, Trump's 2 years younger. That's not exactly a feather in his cap. They're both
a ringing endorsement of youth.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. They're both like what, silent generation? Like they're not even boomers, if I recall correctly. Right. They are a pre-World War II, cohort. And so, yeah, you can't be like, well, he's younger. Oh, Biden's not mentally fit. I haven't heard a lot of coherent sentences out of Trump either, right? So instead of complaining which one of them is too old or not in good health or not mentally stable, right, and mentally, coherent and whatnot, how about we just stop electing 80-year-olds and pretending like somehow that's an acceptable solution for any of us? Anyway, I think we've gone slightly off topic here, but I think kind of bringing it back a little bit here.
Well, it's the charisma is what sells it.
Charisma, and you touched on it, is power, right? Ultimately, a lot of these things revolve around power. And so, when you think about why are people in America today kind of seemingly okay with, again, things that you wouldn't have imagined any American at some point, in our lifetimes being okay with, kind of goes to that question, like, who goes fascist? And a lot of it is power and a lot of it is charisma and whatnot. But I think it's fascinating because I think there's a lot more dimensions to this that we're touching on right now. I was kind of doing a little bit of digging here, and there's a lot of experiments in the field of like social psychology and whatnot around group behavior, right? Herd behavior, groupthink, the way people behave when they're prompted to in a certain way. And I think I want to kind of go over one of those today. Sure. But before I do, I think I want to share something from a fairly well-known article that you may or may not have heard of called "Who Goes Nazi." Have you ever read that?
I have not.
Okay, so
sounds like a great movie title.
It depends, right? Depends on who you get to be the director, right? If it's a Michael Bay, it's going to be definitely a little kaboom going on there.
I think it's got to be a comedy, kind of like the Death of Stalin you mentioned to me. The
Coen Brothers,
still got to see.
Coen Brothers, Wes Anderson. I don't know. Yeah, I forget the name of the guy who did Death of Stalin. That might actually be a good follow up project for them. But Who Goes Nazi was an article written in 1941 by Dorothy Thompson for Harper's Magazine. So Dorothy was a respected journalist and a political commentator who covered totalitarianism and fascism. And famously, she was actually the first American journalist expelled from Nazi Germany in 1934 because of her critical reporting on Hitler and the Nazi regime. So she's not just like some hack observer, like shouting from a peanut gallery like you and I are. Right. She was actually on the ground living it and seeing it firsthand. So I think just to get a sense of who Dorothy was, I want to actually share two sentences that she wrote about Hitler. I don't know that these are the ones that got her kicked out of Germany, but I thought they were hilarious and just an example of what she can accomplish with incredible cattiness and like a true skill at writing. Quote, "He is formless, almost faceless, a man whose countenance is a caricature, a man whose framework seems cartilaginous, without bones. He is inconsequent and voluble, ill-poised, insecure. He is the very prototype of the little man." End quote. So, again, think about it. 1934, she's kicked out of Germany because she's writing shit like this. So Dorothy, I just want to give her props. I don't believe she's alive anymore. She would be ancient at this point. But with that context, I want to give you kind of the opening sentences from the article, Who Goes Nazi? Quote, "I have come to know the types. The born Nazis, the Nazis whom democracy itself has created, the certain to be fellow travelers. And I also know those who never, under any conceivable circumstance, would become Nazis. It is preposterous to think that they are divided by any racial characteristics. Germans may be more susceptible to Nazism than most people, but I doubt it. Jews are barred out, but it's an arbitrary ruling. I know lots of Jews who are born Nazis, and many others who would heil Hitler tomorrow morning if given a chance. There are Jews who have repudiated their own ancestors in order to become honorary Aryans and Nazis. There are full-blooded Jews who have enthusiastically entered Hitler's secret service. Nazism has nothing to do with race and nationality. It appeals to a certain type of mind. It is also, to an immense extent, the disease of a generation. The generation which was either young or unborn at the end of the last war. This is as true of Englishmen, Frenchmen, and Americans as of Germans. It is the disease of the so-called lost generation." End quote.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you see what she's saying there, right? It's not just what we started with, right? It's not just cut and dry intellect or education that factors, right? It's, who's likely to be attracted to fascist ideas. It's also not, especially if you're on the receiving end of criticism from fascists, to take pretty much, right now, any Hispanic group who overwhelmingly voted strongly in favor of Trump this past election, and you see parallels what she's saying with the time when Jews who didn't care or ignored anti-Semitism and still found themselves attracted to Nazism and the ideas, right? Again, it's
Sure.
well, I don't like what he's saying about it, but I like the solution he's offering.
Right. Because obviously the concentration camps didn't start day one.
Oh.
And I think if Hitler decided not to decide, hey, let's get rid of all these people, a lot of them would have been willing soldiers because they were fighting for Germany and they're German citizens. So, and I think what you have here is a lot of people, I mean, in Germany's case, in Italy's case, they were basically humiliated after the war.
Mm-hmm.
They had no money. Their money was becoming, they used to go in wheelbarrows for money in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The inflation was so insane. And so they look at democracy or whatever they had wasn't giving them the answer they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are going to say, it used to be so much better back when. It's shit now. Oh, this guy's telling me we could go back then. All right, why not give him a shot? Because I got really not much to lose.
Exactly. It's, I think she touches on it there with that lost generation quote, right? You've got this post-war, they are humiliated, the economy's in shambles. Weimar Germany, if you look at it from the perspective of its constitution and the way it was organized after the abdication of the Kaiser, was probably you had more rights and freedoms than you do as an American under the Constitution. Like, it was probably the freest, most open society in the West that may have ever existed. Wow. And it didn't fucking work, right? It just was it was a failure because no one was able to come in and address these problems. It was kind of a malaise from the post-war, from the feeling that they were dictated to at Versailles, that they were blamed for all the troubles that had happened, that they were taking the brunt of this. And you think about it in terms of parallel to us in our world, you've got the dot-com bubble, right? You've got the recession post 9/11. You've got 9/11 itself. You've got the wars going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. You've got the Great Recession, the housing market collapse. You've got a slow, period of growth afterwards, but a lot of political infighting and a lot of disagreement over the direction of the country and things like that. And you look at it, it's not hard to say in our adult lives, overwhelmingly, post the fall of the Soviet Union, the country has been largely meandering and struggling and suffering and not really, people, it's easy to kind of look at it and go, I kind of get why people feel lost and that fasci ideas, a strong man, is appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you every year you say, well, the rich are getting richer and I'm not getting anywhere, or I'm getting poorer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to do about this. And here's a guy who's going to make America great again. Maybe that's going to work.
You don't even have to think about what does make America great again mean,
no,
right?
You're right. Yes.
You don't have to think. It just feels good, and that good feeling is enough in a lot of cases, right? And that, again, that doesn't go into education or intellect. It goes into opportunity.
It's what like Mussolini and Hitler all basically did. Because, I mean, their countries were in worse shape than ours by far, but they were like, we're going to make this country great again. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants your country to be great again. I don't remember when America stopped being great, but we could always make it better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
being better, right? And that kind of goes with criticism of the country. And right. I feel a lot of people, it's emotional. They don't allow themselves, like, if, I am critical of America because I think she can do better, right? And I think we can be better for our people and provide better opportunities. This is why I'm critical of the country, right? Because I'm saying we can do things better. We can make things better. We can choose to live a better life and have the country support us in that manner. Right. But a lot of people will turn around and be like, so will you hate America? I'm like, no, I don't fucking hate America any more than I hate any other country, right? We can go on a whole digression about the concept of the state and all these things. And this isn't that kind of podcast necessarily, or at least that's not what this show is going to be about. But no, I want my country to do better. And that's why I point out what I see as not working necessarily. And I say, well, let's improve this. Let's make this better. But it's, again, it's an emotional attachment to the patriotism or nationalism where, no, you can't say anything bad about America. You only have to talk about the good things and the opportunities that she provides, and so just ignore the bad things. So I'm like, that's not a healthy way to look at things, and it's not productive as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I think a lot of people like, I remember you would see a lot of man on the street type stuff where they're like, oh man, it was so much better back in the day. And they're like, really? Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? And it's like, those are kind of like loaded questions because maybe for that person it was. I remember voting with someone who, a very old woman, I think she was 100, and she was at the voting booth and she was like, oh, I remember back then I would take those days compared to now. I'm like, really? Like maybe some of it? But you're like, you were in the Great Depression. That couldn't have been better than right now. I mean, you're 100. I doubt you would be still alive if you were around back then. And there's a lot of people who are on this line who couldn't vote then either. So for some people, it was better. I mean, I have 80s nostalgia coming out my ass. I remember those great times and the cartoons and all the toys and these things I love. But now we have a lot of other great things, but there's got to be a balance. There has to be a balance, and we seem to like shit on each other when we want to have that balance. And it's a good idea. No, it can't be a good idea because you want that idea. Like, but it's a good one though. It works for us. No, you like it, can't happen. And they just keep trying to divide and divide until you have a charismatic guy come in who's like, hey, help us do it this way.
One of those things I've realized as I've gotten older is when we were kids, right, when we were young, the world's problems seemed complicated. And the reason the adults couldn't solve them was they were complicated. And I think now that with the benefit of hindsight, I look at it, I go, the world's problems aren't complicated. They're super simple. The problem with resolving them is they chip away at someone's power. They chip away at someone's profitability, right? It doesn't make anyone money to solve these problems, or
Right.
it takes away a relative level of power for an in-group to solve the problem. So we don't solve the problem because otherwise that person would quote unquote suffer some consequences as a result. So yeah, it's easy to look back at that. And that's kind of the general feeling of, yeah, things used to be better. No, they didn't used to be better. You're just more aware of how shit works. And it's not a comfortable feeling realizing, yeah, problems are solvable. We just choose not to.
Yeah. And we choose to solve less and less of them, it seems. The less you could solve, the better. It always appears as like, let's push that down to somebody else. Let's figure this out later. You know, that's why you have $37 trillion in debt. Because like, we're going to leave this to our children. So why are you increasing the debt?
Yeah, it's like when you look at the criticism of medicine and pharmaceuticals, it's more profitable to treat a disease than it is to cure it, right? Because you get people lifetime by paying you money for therapy, for doctor's visits, for wellness checks, for ongoing services and medication and whatnot, than it is to just to have a one-time cure and boom, you're good to go. And that's always been kind of I think when you pay attention to healthcare, that's always kind of the general takeaway. But I mean, I've seen Goldman Sachs reports, talking about the healthcare sector, talking about the same thing, right? It's not.
It reminds me of Chris Rock's and the greatest special I think of all time, when things bring the pain. Is it's like he's like they got you on the comeback. They just get you. It's like they're drug deal, They get you on the comeback, and he was like, just lie to me, fix something. They got you in the comeback. They're like great drug dealers. Like, I'm not gonna fix this. I'm not gonna give you this vaccine that will cure you. I'm gonna give you a drug that will lessen your situation, but you're gonna have that situation in perpetuity.
Exactly. So I want to bring this back to Dorothy because she goes on in that Who Goes Nazi, right, to detail a dozen different characters. And I'm not going to read them in full. One, because her writing is old fashioned and dense. Mm-hmm. And this is not, I think everyone should read the article themselves. It's only like It's like a little over 2 pages online. It's not huge. We'll provide a link in the show notes, so you can always Google it.
I've already learned 2 words today. The last one that she wrote was cartilage something or other.
Cartilaginous, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even heard of that word. I understand pretty much what it means, but boy, that's a new one. That's going on the noteboard.
Yeah, consider that your word of the day, Adam. So I want to give you kind of a Cliff Notes version of the characters. And we're going to play a game here. I want you to call out whether or not you think that they're the type of person who would go Nazi.
Ooh, game show.
But I'm going to keep score here. We're going to do this for you.
We got to have some like Jeopardy music or.
Oh, you know what? Post-production. We'll get that added in. All right. So you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So Mr. A poor but well-educated editor from an old American family who is modest, cultured, and principled. Yes or no? Does he
editor? No, he's not going Nazi.
Mr. B, a wealthy, popular sportsman and bank vice president who married for money and measures everything by success.
I think he could go full Nazi.
Mr. C, a brilliant but embittered intellectual who achieves success through relentless work while remaining socially excluded.
Socially excluded part. Shit. I think he could go Nazi.
Mr. D, a spoiled, vain young man who has never been denied anything and spends his life seeing what he can get away with, also attracted to the swagger and dominance a uniform would provide.
He's going Nazi.
Mrs. E, a sweet, submissive masochist married to a domineering scientist who humiliates her.
Definitely going Nazi.
Mrs. F, a former actress who is now a popular, witty mother of 4 who stands on her own feet with sound common sense and independence.
I think she's not going Nazi.
Mr. G, a brilliant intellectual who has enthusiastically explained every political and economic theory imaginable over the years.
He's smart, but he could still go Nazi.
Mr. H, a liberal and intellectual American historian of Dutch ancestry who deeply loves America, knows its history intimately, and lives as a gentleman farmer.
Farmer? Is that what you said, gentleman farmer?
Correct.
Okay. He's not going to go Nazi. He's not.
Mr. I, a young German immigrant who looks like a model Nazi, but fled Germany and now works in an airplane factory making planes for Britain.
He's not going Nazi.
Mr. J, a wealthy, powerful Jewish businessman who avoids Jewish associations and believes Hitler shouldn't be judged on anti-Semitism.
He probably could go Nazi.
Mr. K, a Jewish bachelor who sold his successful business to help relatives and now writes about American life on a modest income.
He shouldn't be excluded because he's Jewish. He can go Nazi.
And last but not least, Mr. L, a powerful labor leader who has enriched himself by championing the oppressed while believing the strong should boss the weak.
He likes power. He's going Nazi.
I'm proud of you, Adam. You got everyone correct except for Mr. K, the Jewish bachelor.
Mr. K?
Really? Jewish bachelor who sold his successful business to help relatives and now writes about American life on a modest income.
He's not going Nazi.
He's not going Nazi.
All right. I'll take that 90% or whatever percentage that.
Something like that. Yeah, they're pretty damn good. I honestly, it's funny. Yeah,
I'm a Nazi finder.
So
Look
the
out, world.
So I think, being who we are, while we read, while we kind of dig ourselves in, well done. The one I thought that would trip you up, and this was a conditional yes, was Mr. G, the brilliant intellectual who enthusiastically explained political economic theory imaginable over the years. That was a conditional yes because he would fall in. He would fall in just to not stick out. He would like read the tea leaves or whatever and just be like, yeah, either I get in line or I'm going to be on the firing squad in front of them, right? So he's doing it, yes, because he's just going to preserve himself, not necessarily because he wants to. But yeah, a lot of these, you see this, right? It's not about intellect or education. A lot of these are just Some of these people are just dicks to begin with, and they're like, this appeals to me. A lot of them, they feel excluded. They're an out group. They're not, they're not feeling the love, or, there's an opportunity, right? And they just see themselves as, this is a chance for me to take control here.
Yeah, it's not just like one characteristic where like, oh, yep, that's where they fall in line. But I clearly see that I have a spin-off show someday as the Nazi Finder. He was canceled very quickly.
We got canceled before we even got started.
Finder will no longer be aired.
Yeah. So, I think just a quick quote from Dorothy to wrap this up, right? She's, yeah, believe me, nice people don't go Nazi. Their race, creed, color, social condition is not the criteria. It's something in them. Those who haven't anything in them to tell them what they like and what they don't, whether it's breeding, happiness, or wisdom, or a code, however old-fashioned or however modern, go Nazi, end quote. So, yeah, look, it's interesting because I think she wrote this almost 85 years ago at this point, and you can kind of suss out, just thinking about whether it's public figures or people in your own life, the same archetypes of people, and, what a Trump or a Putin or Orban in Hungary or Erdogan in Turkey, right, have that appeals to them. Like, this is universal. Like, dictatorship isn't an American thing or appealing to dictatorship. It's universal. And a lot of it's opportunism. Some people are just born with a chip on their shoulder, or they feel like they've been shafted or held back from achieving what life would be. And they see it as a disappointment. And in the last 25 years or so, right, we've seen huge strides here in America. Like, a lot of historically marginalized people have started to get their fair share of attention, recognition, and treatment as equal Americans. And so now we've got this reverse pendulum swing where people who are unaffected largely by these people getting their due feel left out or discriminated against, or, generally that the country no longer works for them. And so kind of what you said, let's make it great again. Let's go back to where I was on top of the pile, or at least I felt that I was at the top of the pile.
Yeah, let's strip away the diversity rights. Let's overturn abortion. It just, you see that pattern creating of, all right, we're going backwards again. We're going backwards. Let's get rid of any kind of trans rights. It's just, we're going backwards, but not on any of the things that really will help and make an impact in those people's lives. Those are all basic, like, social issues. And you want a job, you want to have a house, you want to get paid. That's the issues that you're looking for. What do you care if somebody who's gay gets married or has children or does whatever they do in their house? Who cares? It's not going to affect you.
It doesn't affect them. And it's easy for us to say who cares because we know it doesn't affect us. But for someone who's feeling shafted, right, they're like, what the fuck? Like, why are we focusing on this when I'm struggling to make my mortgage, right? To make my car payments, to provide, all the Christmas gifts I want to get my kids. It's easy to be like, why are we focusing on them? And it's this opportunism and taking, it's this mentality of zero sum, right? That there's only so much of the pie to go around, and any rights or freedoms or opportunities given to others means that came at my expense.
Obviously, that's not true in factual terms. So I think it's like,
but it's emotional.
Right, exactly. Because it's like why are we focusing so much on it? Exactly. We shouldn't be focusing it on it all. They should have rights, period. End of story. Let's move on. Let's move on to how we could get you a better job. How we could better educate you. How do we get you health insurance? Let's focus on that, because the easy stuff, done. But nobody wants that. Back to your idea before, is because somebody might lose some bit of power. Mm-hmm. Religious organizations might lose power if all of a sudden all the things that they've been telling you for years are okay now.
Exactly. It's a perception around that. And again, it's a lot emotional. So I want to jump in. So I mentioned kind of social psychology and some experiments and whatnot. I want to kind of dig a little deeper now that we kind of have those archetypes. We talked about some of the people and kind of broke it down a little bit. Have you ever heard of the third wave?
I've heard of it. Or have I heard of the fourth wave? I've heard of the third wave, but I don't really know what that is.
Okay, perfect. So I think you're in for a treat, Adam. So the third wave was an experiment conducted by history teacher Ron Jones at Elwood P. Cubberley High School in Palo Alto in April of 1967. So for this part, I'm going to draw heavily on two items. The first is a 2010 documentary called Lesson Plan that includes interviews with Ron Jones and several of his students. It was actually produced by two of the students from his class. The second is a libcom.org article written by Jones himself in 1972 as a retrospective on what happened. So Jones himself was a Stanford grad, and both he and Cubberley, the high school, were progressive. I think we would call them, it was a well-resourced school in a desirable district. And they had a lot of, Jones came in with a lot of new ideas, and the school itself was very open to creativity in the curriculum. Jones was the kind of guy who would bring in guest speakers like communists, American Nazi Party members, and Klansmen to speak directly to students so that they could hear perspectives directly. They would actively explore both sides of an issue like Vietnam and come up with arguments for and against, like 10 things, right? Why should we do this? Why should we not do this? So it's a very kind of open forum dialectic engagement.
This is all high school, correct?
This is high school, correct. Okay. So in this particular case, the third wave, Jones was teaching a world history course to a 10th grade class. I'm going to quote from it. Quote, "We were studying Nazi Germany, and in the middle of a lecture, I was interrupted by the question, how could the German populace claim ignorance of the slaughter of the Jewish people? How could the townspeople, railroad conductors, teachers, doctors claim they knew nothing about concentration camps and human carnage? How can people who are neighbors and maybe even friends of the Jewish citizens say they weren't there when it happened? It was a good question. I didn't know the answer." End quote. So that happened like at the end of the week. It's April, and Jones is starting to he's already at the Holocaust. Remember, it's 1967. This happened 20 years earlier, right? So he's running out of material. He's ahead of his syllabus, basically. So he comes in the following Monday, and he decides, I'm going to run an experiment. And he describes it as what he thought it would be a one-day exercise that turned out to be a one-week existence of terror. So day one, Jones comes in on Monday. He walks into the classroom, and he writes "strength through discipline" on the chalkboard. And he lectured the class on discipline, how discipline leads to success in sports, dance, art, science, the power of control and will. And some students reported that he was playing like Wagnerian music, that he had removed the decorations, he had arranged the desks in a more organized manner, right? Like organized rows. He taught the benefits of proper posture as an extension of discipline. He had the class sit upright with their feet on the floor, knees at a 90-degree angle, chin up, hands flat against the small of their backs. And he had them practice this over and over. And some of the students reported like, hey, I actually felt like I projected better, right? I felt like better posture. And this is the late 60s. These were, 10th graders. They were just lying about kind of very casually, right? And again, Jones, in the format he ran his classes, it was very loose and open. So this is a big change, right? Kind of being very disciplined, regimented.
Nobody asked, Mr. Jones, what happened last weekend?
Well, so then he removed the students from the room, and then he had them kind of come back in and retake their seats, timing them and having them do it again and faster. And then once they kind of had the speed down, they kind of like left the room, came in, filed to their seats, took good posture and sat down. He had them focus on doing it more smoothly, more disciplined, and more quietly. And so at one point, even Jones thought they hit a good point, right? So now you've got this very regimented kind of, almost marching in class. They're quietly doing so, they're not causing a big ruckus. Jones is like, I think I'm good, ready to move on. Apparently one student raised his hand and was like, Mr. Jones, I think we can go quicker. And the class got up and they did it again. I think objectively you sit back, you think, that's that dick in a group meeting who asked a question, right? At the end of an hour-long call, and you think about...
Or you forgot to give us homework.
Oh, right, that's a student who raised his hand. But the class was like, okay, and they got up and they did it again. And so Jones was like, what's going on, man? Like, should I always teach my classes this way? Have I been doing it wrong, right? He's a young teacher. He's only like a few years in to his career. I think he's in his mid-20s.
Oh, wow.
Maybe kind of mid-late 20s. Yeah. I think he's only like 4 or 5 years into his teaching career at this point, right? So again, he's not much older. He's not much older than the students, which is why like part of the students loved him, right? You got that young teacher who's fun, young. He's not jaded or anything. So in a lot of ways, Jones was making this all up as he went along. So he decided to push a little further. Students were expected at their seats and in the ready position before the final bell rang, the late bell, right, between classes. It was decided they must stand at attention next to their desks to ask and answer questions. So they had to stand up at attention, rigid, then go sit back down quietly. He also changed the students having, they used to, again, refer to him informally. They might even call him Ron by first name basis, right? So he's one of those young, cool teachers. And said they were required to call him Mr. Jones. And at one point, he even required that answers and questions be given in 3 words or less. So punctuality, speed, respect, and discipline took over what had been like an open, casual classroom environment. So day 2, Jones comes in and he's expecting, okay, cool, we did this experiment and, the students would be back to their kind of casual form and relaxed atmosphere, and that they would have a discussion about the prior day and how they felt about it. But before he even got to the classroom, the students were in before the late bell. They got to their seats, they were in their disciplined posture, and they sat there at attention. So he decided, I'm going to wing it. He went up to the blackboard, and yesterday's mantra, strength through discipline, is there. And below that, he writes the next lesson, strength through community. So now he lectured off the cuff, or at least in his recollection, on the idea that community is more important than the individual, that the bond between people who achieve and struggle together is critical. So then he started sort of a chant. He was having the students repeat, strength through discipline, strength through community, strength through discipline, strength through community, over and over. And at one point, he even had the students kind of adding in like a little bit of a foot stomp, right, to give it a physical element, to make it kind of a true, to resonate with them. Exactly. To kind of help build that shared sense of community and togetherness for the people in this classroom. And to hear the students say it, he brought up the idea of sharing a grade. Some say that. The good students, like the A students, were not fans of that, right? They're also, they're the alpha types, right? They're kind of, but the mediocre students were thrilled. They're like, yeah, no, this is easy, right? I could just go along with this and get a good grade as a group. The funny thing is, they all started to kind of collaborate on the classwork and submit answers together. They would help each other and prompt each other to kind of improve. So you'd always have like, any class, you've got a couple of students who are super engaged. You got a couple of students who are completely disengaged. You got this mushy middle, right, that may or may not engage, and you might have to kind of push them a little bit. He was thrilled because they were starting to all get more engaged and collaborate together in a way that they really weren't prior to that. Super smart students, the bright students weren't thrilled. Jones wrote about one specific group of them in his libcom.org write-up. Quote, "These 3 young women were by far the most intelligent students in the class. As friends, they chummed together. They possessed a silent confidence and took pleasure in a school setting that gave them academic and leadership opportunity. During the days of the experiment, I was curious how they would respond to the equalitarian and physical reshaping of the class. The rewards they were accustomed to winning just didn't exist in the experiment. The intellectual skills of questioning and reasoning were non-existent. In the martial atmosphere of the class, they seemed stunned and pensive. And now that I look back, they appeared much like the child with so-called learning disability. They watched the activities and participated in a mechanical fashion. Whereas others jumped in, they held back, watching." End quote. Yeah. Kind of an interesting observation there about it's not just, opportunists, right, or kids who might feel left behind jumping in, but it's also kind of flattens the classroom. It kind of knocks the people at the top of the heap down a few pegs. So when one student, Sherry Towsley, stood up and asked why they couldn't freely express themselves, he publicly dismissed her to the library as punishment. The message was, you were either all in or all out.
I was waiting for you got to get rid of the couple of outsiders who were going to resist.
Yeah. So she was disappeared. So Sherry, who was sent to the library, figures she has an F, right? They talked about this kind of group grade. She got kicked out. She's an A student, right? Or at least that's a perception, or she's a very good student. So she figures she has an F and she's like, all right. She figures the other faculty are in on the experiment. The principal knew, but Jones didn't tell everybody. So she's confronted by the librarian. The librarian's like, why the hell aren't you in class? And so she tells the librarian about the third wave as she understood it so far, right? 2 days in, at some point in the second day. Turns out the librarian was a survivor of the Nazi regime. And it was a German emigre and basically told her that she had to do something. She's like, this is not right. So Sherry went home, told her parents, and apparently her dad was like, yeah, no, you got to do something. So she came back that night to the school with posters that she hung up that denounced the third wave.
So it had a name at this point?
Yeah, no, they had named it he had named it the third wave at some point during
Okay.
the first day or whatnot. So yeah, so she hung up posters denouncing the third wave. Within an hour the next morning at school, she went to go check on those posters and they were all gone. Someone had done a sweep and ripped them down. Jones says that he didn't tell any students to do so, that they had just done so on their own volition. They saw these posters, they were in Jones's class, they were still inside, they were in the third wave, and so they just ripped them down. This revolutionary propaganda. So the next evening, Sherry made more posters and she brought a ladder with her. Her dad helped her with that. So she posted them higher up out of reach. Most of them came down, but a few of them were at least partially or completely out of reach of the students. Like people like jumped up and made sure to like get them. So Sherry, who was actually used to live in Rhode Island, labeled the posters with the name The Breakers after the famous mansion and as a nod to breaking waves, right? Because this group was called the Third Wave. So now, without Jones's knowledge or prompting, not only did he create an in-group, the Third Wave, he now had a resistance group opposing them completely on their own. That
I'm
was done.
fascinated that she would go through this trouble. You would think that she would go, I'm just going to the principal's office and be like, what the hell is this? No, I'm going to take it upon myself to make lots of posters and put them up on walls and tell my parents, and they're not going to tell anybody either. They're just going to help me.
Mhm.
It's sounds like a TV show.
Yeah, it's wild. So on that second day, also, Jones introduced a hand signal. It was basically a cupped hand held up at head height, like a T-Rex Nazi salute, right? It didn't go all the way. The arm wasn't fully extended, but the concept was similar, right? And the fingers were kind of folded over in like a cupping, like a question mark shape, of the idea being that it was a crest of the wave, right? That was part of the group. He had introduced that name, the third wave, and that's how students had a secret signal that only insiders knew. So this gets a little confusing. I'm saying this is starting on day 3, but it's a little bit blurred between the documentary and Jones's own notes. So I'm kind of doing my best to, bear with me as I'm trying to, kind of clean this up a little bit. On day 3, Jones's class started with 30 students, Monday, Tuesday, right? That was his class. On day 3, on Wednesday, 13 students from other classes cut to join his sophomore world history class and to listen in on the third wave.
It's interesting.
So he walks into class. Instead of 30 kids, there's 43 of them. He's like, all right, goes to his desk, reaches into a drawer, and he pulls out index cards. And the index cards were supposed to mimic party membership cards. 3 of the index cards had a red X on them to signify special status. Those 3 red cards are informants. They're designated informants by Jones. He expected them to report to him if any students were not conforming to the community values, strength through discipline, strength through community, and the standards, namely the salute and other kind of, things that they had decided to kind of, do as a third wave. He also introduced another concept, strength through action, saying that community and discipline were nothing without action. You had to do the deeds. He then prompted the third wavers to start making propaganda posters to promote their group. They went out into the hallways and they started to pass out the flyers to other students. They also set up tables attempting to recruit new members to the third wave from other students in the school who were not in Jones's class. So, a couple of things, right? The first thing, the funny thing about the informants, it was the 3 students, right, that had the red X on their card. More than 3 students started informing on each other. Jones claims that he had close to half the class, about 20 kids, reporting back to him on various infractions. So students took it on themselves to be informants and to snitch on others within the group for not conforming necessarily. Students said that a new rule was created, most likely because of Sherry and her kind of propaganda posters, that they could not gather in more than groups of 2 outside the classroom. The idea here was to clamp down on organizing around counter-protest. 2 things happened. First is that physical altercations actually started to break out between third wave members who were out there recruiting, who were just going, hey, what's the third wave about? And they just went strength through discipline, strength through community, strength through action. And people were like, what the hell is wrong with you people?
What does that mean?
Right. And they couldn't really give details of the third wave. They were just like strength through discipline, strength through community. People like, you're fucking weird. And they would kind of step up and confront each other. These third wavers would be like, What are you talking about, our group? So physical altercations apparently occurred in the hallways between some of the students. The second was that students not in Jones's classes, those 13 I had mentioned, plus others, including juniors and seniors, upperclassmen, a lot of people who described themselves, they belonged in high school. They wanted to be part of an in crowd. They didn't really have a group. They didn't have a kind of a feeling of camaraderie. They started to join the third wave. So you've got this recruitment drive, and it's not just sophomores, it's juniors and seniors as well. So again, he started with 30 students. On day 3, he had 43 students. On day 4, sorry, just double checking my notes, he had 80 students by the time the fourth day came up.
He's going viral before there was a going viral.
Yes, exactly. Sherry Towsley, the Breakers revolutionary, at one point, again, she's banished from class for the duration of this. So she's going to the library. At one point, she says she walked past the door and noticed that the classroom was standing room only. And she's like, what the hell is going on here? The crazy thing is, it's not even students from outside the classroom. Students from outside of Cubberley High School, nearby Palo Alto High School and others, started to hear about the third wave and expressed interest in joining as well. This was, to your point, this was going viral before viral was a thing. Word was getting out there. Per Jones, I became frightened when I realized that there were students coming into the classroom from outside the original class. And I also knew that there were students from the other 2 high schools in the district that were thinking about joining third wave. I was privy to that kind of gossip. Those red X's I had given everybody became this funnel of information. I knew everything that was happening. It was scary to know minute details of what someone was telling their parents or what someone was telling their best friend. Student Mark Hancock, another one of the original third wave classroom participants and co-producer of the lesson plan documentary I'm drawing on here, describes what happens next when students were called out by Jones for mock trials. Quote, in this classroom was Mr. Jones at the head of the class and us sitting in our rows. He would come into the class and tell us that he had heard from his secret police that there had been violators to be tried that day. He would stand up in front of the class and he would say, so-and-so, and they would snap to attention at their desk. So-and-so, you have been seen in the company of known revolutionaries. What do you have to say about that? All of a sudden, the class would start chanting in unison, guilty, guilty, guilty. Jones would go over to his desk, grab one of his ditto forms and say, so-and-so, you are hereby exiled to the library for the duration of the experiment. Whenever this class meets hereafter on a daily basis, you are to go to the library. You are never to come back to class. And that student would be escorted out of the class and they would be gone. Getting even crazier.
He used the word experiment, like they know they're in an experiment at this point?
That is how it was said by Mark Hancock. I don't know if that was necessarily the word that Jones used at the time, but that's how he phrased it. Yeah, when he said this. And so to kind of continue the trend of things escalating, spiraling, getting out of hand, third wave members began to self-appoint as Mr. Jones's bodyguards. They would occupy seats by the door to the classroom to guard it. They would begin to escort him through the halls outside of class. And one of them even tried to accompany him into the faculty lounge. Another one of the teachers confronted them and said, you can't be in the faculty
next to you in the bathroom.
I don't know. Probably. One of the teachers in the faculty lounge confronted the student and said, hey, you're a student. You can't be in here. And the student goes, I'm not a student. I'm a bodyguard. That was his response. Another one of Jones's classes, not involved in the original third wave, I think it was a junior class, cornered him privately, like in a dumpster out behind the school, and demanded that he appoint them as his Gestapo as part of this whole experiment going on. And so I think what's fascinating here is you compare this to like famous sociology experiments like Jane Elliott's Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment that happened a year later in 1968, or the Stanford prison experiment, which I'm sure you've heard of in 1971, right? Those participants are very clearly told their roles and expectations, what's an in-group and what's an out-group, and they adopted the expectations around that depending on whether they were in the in-group, the privileged group, or they were not. Jones didn't do that. Right? He just set standards and expectations for the group largely as a whole. The third wave, he created slogans, rules, a sense of direction, and it kind of gave them a vague framework and secret police to enforce those rules and the framework, right? It was intended to be a one-day thing. He didn't start by saying, we're going to be Nazis, we're going to go fascist. He just provided a spark. It was the students that grew that spark into kind of this raging fire, or at least what started to become a raging fire. And you could see they're running with this on their own and organically taking the experiment in a direction that's really scary.
So I'm shocked that like nobody or even Jones did not say, maybe I got to dial it back a little bit. Maybe I'm going a little too far.
To hear him say it, he's plagued by doubt the entire time. And it's like, should I pull the plug? And actually, we're going to touch on that a little bit later. I bring that up here. So
especially the speed of which it's taking place, unless he's confusing days with weeks. I mean, this is really fast.
Nope. This happened all in the span of a week. And that's the insanity, right? They dove right in head first. Lunacy.
Like, so finally somebody understands us.
Well, that's a big part of it, right? So day 4, Jones enters the classroom, standing room only at this point. He's got 80 kids in the class. Remember, this is not how high school works. He had 30 to start with. He's now almost tripled that number. Standing room only. He comes in day 4, closes and locks the door. Remember, he's largely making this up as he goes along. This was not some big plan. That doesn't mean he doesn't have ideas of what to do, right? But he's kind of winging it. Bodyguards are stationed on both sides of the door. He draws the curtains and he turns off the lights. And he announces that they're no longer part of an experiment. That this was not a game, what their classroom was doing. That teachers all over the nation were running the same project. And that the goal was to get together and form a political party in the United States. That they were the vanguard of a movement to bring a new sense of order, community, pride, and action, and that everything rested on their willingness to see this through and to take a stand.
Wow, he's going hard now.
He committed. He pot committed at this point. Ooh. And to what you were saying before, right? Like, he had some doubts. We'll get to that and talk about that in a little bit. First thing they did, they held mock trials and, quote unquote, assassinated students who were not fully committed to the cause. Namely, those 3 female students he mentioned previously as being the smartest and the brightest in the classroom. He got rid of them. He got rid of a few others. And those that remained, he told them, you're the true believers. You're the strong ones who will move the national movement forward. They were then told that the next day, the party leader was going to reveal themselves. And that the next day they would go to an auditorium, like lecture hall within the high school. And there was a TV on a closed circuit where the National Party leader and their proposed presidential candidate would reveal themselves. They were instructed to not reveal this information to others. There were rumors that a student went to another member of the faculty to voice their concerns, and that student was turned in and exiled. And that helped to stifle dissent among the people, right? So again, we've assassinated the dissidents or potential dissidents, the people who weren't truly committed. You're the ones who are truly committed. There's rumors flying around that people are being, snitched on. So no one is at this point is kind of breaking ranks.
And assassinated means being sent to the library.
Sent to the library, exactly. You're out of the club. You're out of the third wave. You're no longer part of the in-group. Right.
Excommunicated. There's no death involved.
Excommunicated, social suicide, right? Social murder, right. But not actual. There was no wall. There was no bucket full of sand. None of this stuff.
It got hard really fast as the assassinations begun.
He pulled out a 9mm, and no, that's not how it worked. Where was I? So, and the students, they were excited. You have to remember that the background here, right? If you take a step back from all this, is Vietnam. And for a lot of these students, it didn't matter if they were the sophomores or some of the juniors and seniors who had joined, they were graduating soon. And for a lot of them, especially the ones who weren't the best and brightest in the class, the ones who weren't jocks who were going to get scholarships and move on, to bigger and better things, right? The ones who weren't going to necessarily go to college, they were living in the wake of the JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and other assassinations over the prior three or so years. Especially the seniors, who are more likely to be kind of the long-haired radical protesting types at the time, they were openly saying, we're going to get the pigs out of Washington. We're going to get out of Vietnam. That was a mantra that they were stating on campus around this. And so these kids, they, again, background is Vietnam. Their future is, well, the government's going to give you a rifle and ship you overseas, and you have a good chance of dying, right? Yeah. You don't actually have a future. So they're kind of like, they've got this in-group. They're being told it's a national movement. They're legitimately jazzed about this, right? They're excited.
vote yet, most of them. So, but now they're like, hey,
Mhm.
maybe in a year or two I might need to, and at least I'll have these guys as support. It wasn't getting
Exactly.
drafted because that's what they were doing, drafting you.
Right. They feel like they're voiceless. Exactly. I'm 16. I'm graduating within 2 years. I don't want to be sent to the meat grinder that is Vietnam, but there's someone here who's going to speak up on my behalf and defend my future. Yeah. So a lot of the students were concerned, right, about where this movement was going, and they were frightened, right? And there still was this veneer of this is just a classroom exercise and this is just Ron Jones's world history class. But at the same time, this kind of sense of solidarity started growing because they knew what the real world stakes were, right? They weren't blind to what their futures were and kind of the factors around them. And they didn't want to be the weak link that fucked things up for everyone else. And so even if they were uncomfortable, they still didn't want to miss out on what felt like a big event, right? We call it FOMO today, right?
Yes.
But yeah, they kind of had this look. I don't want to be the guy who chickens out and screws this up if this is real.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things are getting interesting. Day 5, Jones does not show up to class that morning. Students pile into the classroom. 2 of his self-appointed bodyguards show up to escort the class to the auditorium that he had mentioned. The third wave group walked into the room. At that point, they had some 200 students, and the auditorium itself was full. Yeah, so the whole Fight Club, first rule of Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. They weren't doing that. They managed to recruit, another, more students than they even had the prior day. There were photographers in there taking pictures. These were friends of Jones that he had asked to act as press to kind of sell the image of what was going on. His self-appointed bodyguards and that, class that had cornered him, they're like, we want to be your Gestapo. They were bodyguards and they were standing at the entrances to the room guarding it. The room was dark. It was quiet. Jones was on the floor of the auditorium at the front of the room. And he says to the class, let us show everyone the extent of our training. So they stood up, stood to attention, and started chanting out straight through discipline, straight through community, straight through action, getting louder and louder, repeating the phrase, right? He's having them put on a show for the press, the photographers that he had brought into the room. Jones had them sit at attention, and then he turned on the TV set at the front of the room, and he told them to wait for the party leader to come on. He then left the room. The bodyguards left the room, and the photographers left the room. It was just static on the TV and the clock showing 12 noon. So now the students, these 200 or so students, they're alone in the room, and this kind of sense of foreboding and fear starts to set in. And the clock keeps going. It's like 12:05, 12:07 or something like that. And this idea, they're just sitting there watching the static in the dark room of 200 people. They describe it as feeling like the room was alive and breathing, in terms of like the anticipation that they could feel. And the idea that something wrong started to settle into their minds as they waited. Once one of the students described how the thought suddenly entered his mind of Jews being shuffled into the showers at Auschwitz, waiting for gas pellets to be dropped from up above.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Then they started to break. They started to panic. Several of them got up and they ran for the doors of the back of the room. And in their recollection, they said, I expected these doors to be locked. Jones was standing at the back of the room. He snuck back in. He turned on the lights and he walked slowly to the front of the room. Suddenly, one of the students yelled out, there is no party leader. And at that point, Jones addressed the room. What I've witnessed has really sickened me. We are no better or worse than the Germans. We are just like them. Then he turned off the TV and he turned on a projector and he played footage of Hitler and the Nazi Party rally films from Nuremberg onto the wall behind in the back of the auditorium onto a screen, and announced, basically revealed to the students that this had been a hoax all along and how quickly and easily they had been misled down a dark and dangerous path. The video ended on the frame stating, everyone must accept the blame. No one can claim that they didn't in some way take part. So at this point, yeah. I know, wild, right?
Yeah, some really deep shit there.
So to hear it, some students were shaking, others were crying, and some just held on to each other to comfort each other. Most of them,
Some were probably really embarrassed.
well, a lot of them, most of them, the way they describe themselves, they were in shock, right? They were just literally in shock. They just didn't know how to process what was just happening.
They thought they were better than that, obviously.
Yeah.
Most people would think they're better than that.
And it wasn't just the things that they had done over the course of the current week. It was just how easily they had been duped. That even though they had literally just been educated in the horrors of the Third Reich and Nazism, here they were actively allowing themselves to be indoctrinated and making something similar, right? This kind of groupthink happen again. So yeah, it's kind of wild. I want to kind of bring this back to Dorothy Thompson. Remember her, right? The Who Goes Nazi, and kind of the archetype characters she mentioned. And I kind of want to reference that against Ron's written account. Remember that student I mentioned that appointed himself the bodyguard?
Yeah.
And tried to break into the faculty room? Yeah. Here's what Jones wrote. Quote, I particularly remember Robert. Robert was big for his age and displayed very few academic skills. He tried harder than anyone I knew to be successful. He handed in elaborate weekly reports copied word for word from the reference books in the library. Robert is like so many kids in school that don't excel or cause trouble. They aren't bright, they can't make the athletic teams, and they don't strike out for attention. They're lost, invisible. The only reason I came to know Robert at all is that I found him eating lunch in my classroom. He always ate lunch alone. Well, the third wave gave Robert a place in school. At least he was equal to everyone. He could do something, take part, be meaningful. Once again, I faced the thoughts of closing the experiment or letting it go its own course. Both options were unworkable. If I stopped the experiment, a great number of students would be left hanging. They had committed themselves in front of their peers to radical behavior. Emotionally and psychologically, they had exposed themselves. If I suddenly jolted them back to classroom reality, I would face a confused student body for the remainder of the year. It would be too painful and demeaning for Robert and the students like him to be twisted back into a seat and told it's just a game. They would take the ridicule from the brighter students that had participated in a measured and cautious way. I couldn't let the Roberts lose again. End quote. So touches on what you're bringing up, right? Like
being generous there. Yeah, I really, honestly, as you were talking about, I was feeling a lot of sympathy for him because he was like, finally, there's some place I could belong. And it's like, oh shit, this is being taken away from me again.
that's exactly what it is. When you realize he's like all these kids, right? These misfits, right? The non-star performers, the kids who don't necessarily fit. These were the ones he realized were flocking to his room. They were the ones flocking to the third wave. They were the most ardent supporters of it, right? These people who remember Dorothy Thompson, the guy who was successful but socially never accepted. Right. Or, felt that they never quite achieved what they thought they were capable of, or that they felt that they were kind of excluded from the main group. Is that those were the ones who go Nazi, right? Those are the ones who seek out the group, and it elevated them. It gave them purpose. It gave them meaning, and it brought them into the fold, into the in-group in a way that's just not possible for the majority of the kids in the class. Right. So, the aspiring social climbers, the ones obsessed with status and swagger, socially excluded, secretly enjoy inflicting and receiving pain, right? Think about it. 3 snitches in the classroom, 3 secret police, yet he was receiving almost 50% of the classes reporting to him. They liked either inflicting the pain or, seeing others suffer as a result of it.
Probably just wanting to be the special one. Like, I'm special. I got this information for you.
Exactly. I'm dead average. I have nothing special to bring to the group, but I can snitch on this person and I can raise my status accordingly with the leader here who matters or matters to me. Yeah. And, that's the opportunism, right? To go Nazi, quote unquote. Jones drew in a cross section of these students from athletics, clubs, outcasts and others. And again, high school doesn't work that way, that kids join the classroom in the middle of April. And, you suddenly go from 30 to 200 students.
So like ones from other schools that are interested in coming over, like, excuse me, Mr. Principal, what are you doing?
Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see anything about any students from other schools actually joining, but they were aware of it and some apparently had expressed interest. So, yeah, I think these kids had an opportunity to raise themselves up and knocking down those above them and kind of leveling the playing fields and giving them that opportunity. And so, yeah, it's an interesting experiment. Again, it's not like a lot of these social psychology experiments where, hey, you're designated in group, you're designated out group, and, play act and people adopt the roles, right? He really just set up a framework. He just set up some basic concepts and people fell in line expecting a reward for it, right? And it may have just been at day 1, day 2 that they were expecting a better grade. But at a certain point, this went beyond just, I want a good grade and I'm committed to the bits. Even if they had fear and doubts, like they continued to snowball this entire exercise. Yeah. And it grew out of control. And so, it
didn't go to his head and be like, wait a minute, maybe I got something here. Maybe we should try to do something about this and like really spread this word out. Like he really wasn't like a part of it kind of thing. Because I could see the power going to his head and be like, wow, I can control all these people in 5 days. What else can I do?
Well, that's what we talked about at the beginning, right? It's if you actually had absolute power, dictatorship, like would you be benevolent? Or would you take the opportunity to abuse it? I think he was concerned the whole time. He was still a teacher, and that was his main thing, was to get the lesson out there, right? Get the students to learn and see and experience these things. But if he didn't have that kind of grounding, those sort of principles around it, he easily, he could have, this is the late 60s, it's California. The guy could have started a cult. Like that's how this shit happened back then, right? Yeah. Like this is not that far-fetched from how plenty of cults actually operate. So thankfully, Ron Jones is an interesting character, but not a sociopath as far as anything I've been able to see about it.
That's
right. I think, and when we bring it back to today, right, look at MAGA. We've had this backlash against the elite and the educated, against globalization, against science and people who are experts in their various fields. We've had this for solid 15, 20 years, right? Just kind of in the general undercurrent of our society. I think it was Isaac Asimov who said that just there's this undercurrent of ignorance in America and anti-intellectualism. But MAGA, I think, really has been kind of the spearhead of it to accelerate it more recently. And it's definitely given, when you look at, it's not that people are stupid, right? Or they're uneducated. It's that it's given them a sense of belonging and being part of a greater whole.
Yeah, it's really just, fascism. It's just a much larger picture of, you have gangs, you have cults, like you mentioned. It's like all these things are very similar. This goes further. I mean, like MAGA, there was a woman who supported Trump. I was watching her a number of months ago. So a woman who supported Trump, was a diehard MAGA person, worked for the government, ended up being laid off by Doge. She's like, well, this wasn't part of the plan. Why am I losing my job? I'm really good at what I do. And she started to like turn on them. And it's like, I took her flags down, and the people that she knew who were big MAGA fans would throw eggs at her house. It's like she left the group. She left the cult, left the gang. And it was like, she was starting to get afraid because people would send her death threats. And I was like, wow. It's like once you're in, you're in. There's no way out for someone like in her situation. And it's like, this is legit. This is real.
Especially, if your friends, family, neighbors are all in on it, you suddenly dropping out makes you an outcast. And now think about it, right? Let's just say you're a hardcore Trump MAGA 3-time voter, all in, and suddenly, you lose your job, or your spouse gets deported because technically they were illegal, right? Or some, one of these other things, and you decide to leave. Well, you've kind of burned your bridges with everyone who was like telling you for years, this is fucked up.
Yeah, and right? People in your group where's their empathy? It's like, wait a minute, but you cared about me like 2 weeks ago. I don't have a job anymore. It's like, fuck you.
It's hard, right? And it's, it's part of that movement, right? If you think about it more broadly, there really isn't a huge sense of community in America today. What do you really have that's community-based? You've got
just religion.
Religion is a huge one. And thank you. Yeah, religion and sports are the two things. And those have various professional teams, college teams, your local little leagues and other kind of organizations, of course, the places of worship, but that's really it, right? So your senses of community are not more broadly, it has these layers that it skips till it gets to America, the flag, patriotism, and then it kind of gets like real jingoistic real fast from there. And you might be like, I love America, but I'm not all, I'm wearing the flag as a thong, right? I'm not that committed type of deal. But I think that leads to a lack of empathy, right? Because now you have clear in-groups and out-groups based off the communities you're in. And with MAGA especially, the group is very vocal and very visible.
Yeah.
Around that. So
they wear the colors.
They wear the colors. It's a very high visibility, high identity in-group. And anybody can join, right? But God help you if you try to leave. And those are the people you're leaning on. And to what you were saying before, right, about the lady who lost her job and took everything down. I mean, you still see MAGAs who I voted for Trump and now my spouse has been deported, but I'm still MAGA to the core. I believe in Trump. I believe 100%. It's like, dude, literally, you just lost your wife or your husband. Your family is now shattered irrevocably. Like your income is screwed. Like everything about your life is screwed, yet you're still, quote unquote, in the cult. It's lunacy, right? It's just how tightly people cling to these things. And you see that with these students, right? In Jones's experiments, like they're breaking down, they're crying. Some are playing it off at the end in the documentary. They're like, yeah, I knew it was fake all along. It's like, sure you did, buddy. I want to jump back in on Jones. So in his notes that I leaned on, they were adapted into a novel by Todd Strasser and then into a movie a few years back. So basically a fictionalized version of that. That book is required reading in Germany and in some other countries as well, as to the rise of fascism, this kind of cult mentality and whatnot. These aren't relegated to history. These can happen today, and these are used to teach. And I think, look, taking a step back, if we want to start pushing back against this, right, let's have some solutions here. We need to not just tell that fascism was bad, because now what you have today, you have plenty of people in the media who are like, oh, fascism is fine. And now you have people like, yeah, well, I guess I'm a fascist. And it's like, dude, that shouldn't be cool, right? So we got to stop telling people about these things and start showing them how problematic the behavior and how these things line up with what's going on today. It doesn't mean you're going to convince everyone, but it's going to help. At least it'll provide like a common framework to start to evaluate it from, I think. And then we see it in, the election results from last year, right? Young men, like Gen Z men, turned especially hard to the right. And to what we saw with Jones' experiment, it's because they don't see a place for themselves in society, at least not in the way that used to be. And MAGA especially gives them a platform to mingle with others, to commiserate about how they're feeling, and gives them a chance to fight back. And I think overwhelmingly as Americans, we think of ourselves as special and unique. American exceptionalism is, regardless of anything, the way we always approach everything we do, and that we're immune to the worst of humanity's impulses. We're clearly not, but we believe that it simply can't happen. Yeah. And so, the other way we go about this is we have to start fostering actual community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I don't have a good solution for that, but as it is now, we know that we are in echo chambers, right? We're in our bubbles, and we tend to only talk to people who try to agree with us, or at least don't bother us. And we listen to the same news sources that tell us what we want to hear and things like that. We got to start breaking through those barriers, right? I look at Graham Plattner, that congressional candidate, or Senate candidate in Maine. I don't know if you've looked at him at all, but he's coming out of very, very leftist platform, going for Susan Collins' seat. He's targeting her directly and calling it out. He's an oyster farmer. And
I've heard of him.
Yeah, and I was watching a video of him. He's like, people are asking me, he's like, how are you going to talk to the MAGAs? How are you going to talk to the Trumpists? He's like, I talk to them all the time. Like, we're at work, and guess what? We have the same 3-4 complaints about what's wrong in our lives and what we need to improve, regardless of political identity, regardless of what team you're on and all that. And that's, I think, where we need to start being, right? We want to provide for our families. We want to know that we have a secure financial opportunities for them. and things like that, like all the core things that are relevant. It's kind of that hierarchy of needs, right? The
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need shelter, we need food, we need family, we need nurture and support. Like we got to start with these things and making sure that these are a priority in society. And then I can think we start to heal some of this divide.
Yeah, because we've just been blinded by like flashy social issues that people care about to some extent, but it's the meat and potatoes that people care about, and those seem to always be ignored.
Yeah, exactly. And I look at this right now. I think the X factor in all this is Trump. He's 79 years old. He just spent the better part of the last week with rumors of his death circulating left and right. And they started on Twitter, right? On right-wing media. And then it got picked up by, kind of the mainstream, like, oh my God, is he dead? Is it actually happening? And I look at it this way, right? That moment when he finally kicks it, whether it's a blood clot now as is being rumored or something else, is that for this nation going to be like that static-filled TV at the front of the auditorium? And this sudden realization by the people that they were taken in by groupthink and emotion, and that they've been caught up in the moment. And what will we do with that, right? Will we take it as a moment to reset and recalibrate our priorities and start working together? Or are we going to take it another direction?
No, that's a great point, because there will be definitely a little bit of a power suck, because Vance and none of them are Trump. None of them just have this way about them like him. So I don't know who else is waiting in the wings, but I think it'll be very difficult for a lot of people. Like, okay, he's gone now. Now what do we do? Another Trump? His children don't have the same swagger as he does.
No, I think his hold on the Republican Party and politics in this country is unique. I can't think of anyone else who could conceivably do what he's doing, right? And just kind of bully through what's going on. Obviously, you've got J.D. Vance as Peter Thiel's plant, right? So those are the techno-libertarians. That's the Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin, right? That kind of, we should create techno-theocratic states that are run by CEO kings. And that's how the country should be run. And these are deeply antisocial people who don't fit in. I mean, a lot of them, you would just say they're on the spectrum to some extent, but they feel that they should be in charge, that they are superior in a way. Do they get critical mass? Do they continue to have enough control and the reins of power to push through their agenda, right? To do the Project 2025 stuff? Or Graham Plattner is a great example, right? Do we start to get meaningful candidates for change who aren't about that kind of push it back towards the people and, talk about just everyday issues and the opportunities that we all need? I don't know. It's interesting. I think, again, we live in unprecedented times. I would like to live in precedented times. Again, please,
Yes.
Thank you, at some point. But, we're going to be at some key turning points soon. And I think, this is at least a starting point for some of us to think about how we engage with others and maybe what we want to, how we want to engage with others going forward, and think about where they've been. Exactly.
Well, that's the name of our podcast. That's why we're idiots seeking a village. We want community. And we just want positive ones, the ones that unite us and raise us up and not put us down and marginalize us. It's that simple.
Exactly. I mean, it's not just us finding our people, right? That our village. It's about all of us finding the village, the one village for people, right? For America and Americans, but also, just humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
So.
Caring is what's important.
All right, buddy. That's the end of my script. This is definitely our longest episode so far. How do you feel?
I think it was a good one. I think this was a really good one.
Well, let's see if our 2 subscribers agree.
I felt this was much more. I mean, I'm much more maybe comfortable because I'm in my own chair and I can move around more. But I felt more comfortable, and I just think this was pretty good.
I'm going to banish you from my house. I'll make this easy. Strict no Adams rule. All right, dude. Been good talking to you, and we will catch you next week.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Idiots Seeking Village is a production of Village Idiots Media. For more, find us online at villageidiotsmedia.com or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and wherever you get podcasts.